This panel is called My Day Job, which I think is fascinating because I'm guessing nobody has the same day job at this table, possibly in the film industry. It could even be an anomaly, I don't know. But one thing, if you're unfamiliar with the festival, it's a festival that promotes women filmmakers and their films, but women make a wide variety of kinds of films, and we actually screen multiple different genres, formats. Many of them are artists in all sorts of different disciplines. And so I'm guessing especially our artists' day jobs have different backgrounds. And we also have some clips that we're going to show with their work. And then we're going to open it up to our guests here, and you can ask questions. One of the reasons we wanted to talk about My Day Job, this is, the festival comes from Stevens College, which is a very old women's college that started a film program about 9 years ago. And we try to demystify the idea of what they imagine is a filmmaker's everyday life. And we try to tell them the truth, which is that oftentimes you're juggling a variety of things, or your day job is maybe totally unrelated to your work. And so I'm really interested, we're going to watch clips of your work, and perhaps how your day job corresponds with your work. I mean, I personally make films outside of my day job for the most part, and where you want to go with that, or perhaps even how you got to where you are. So a little snippet of a biography, I suppose, would be great. To my right, I'll introduce Penny Lane first. Penny Lane, I feel like I've met you because we've had a film of yours at the festival before, and I'm a huge admirer of your work. She's here with a film called Our Nixon, which is, I think, a really unique film style. So I get the impression that you've come to your own work through all sorts of different influences. We're going to show a clip of that first when you guys are ready. I love your website, and you call yourself the Maker of Things.
Maker of Things.
I'm excited after this clip we can hear about those things.
Okay.
I, Richard Milhouse Nixon, do solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States, so help me God.
It was an extremely exciting time for all of us.
You're working for the President of the United States. You all elected him, and it's up to us to make it work.
I've never laughed as much as when I worked in the Nixon White House.
And if the music is square, it's because I like it square.
There were pranks and incredible friendships, and it was our personalities that made it all nice.
Even though the information may have leaked out, until I say it, it's not official.
We're on, and we're smart.
First, it was called the Watergate Caper. 5 men burglarizing and bugging Democratic headquarters in Washington.
White House aides recruited secret intelligence work against the Democrats.
How are you going to handle that?
I was not concerned whether people liked me. I was only concerned with what the president wanted.
From the eyes of people who work for the president, all law stops at the White House fence.
Watergate, Watergate, Watergate.
They're trying to destroy it.
I'm convinced he really didn't know the difference between what was true and what wasn't.
I didn't know about the Watergate. God damn it, I never heard of it, John. My recollection is that this was discussed with you.
We're on Air Force One, and it occurred to me I could crash this airplane and put an end to everybody's problems.
Men in the Nixon White House went to jail. The president is out of office. What happened?
I don't know what happened.
I will never regret the work that I've done with Richard Nixon.
In the whole history of man, all the people on this earth are truly one.
I loved what I did. These friendships are golden.
God bless America, and God bless each and every one of you.
You're a strong man, God damn it, and I love you.
So that's Our Nixon. It's playing Saturday and Sunday. And so, when do you work on Our Nixon? And I'm also interested, it came out earlier this year to amazing critical acclaim. And if your life's changed, your day job has changed since then.
So, first of all, thanks for having me. This is really great, and thanks you guys for coming. It's really nice outside, so I especially appreciate you coming into this dark room to hang out with us. My day job is that I'm a college professor. I teach studio art, video art, and sometimes filmmaking, but I'm in a studio art context. I have an MFA in art. I didn't go to film school, I went to art school. So it definitely affects my life in a bunch of ways. The first thing is that I approach my projects, for lack of a better way of putting it, like an artist would, right? So very open-minded in terms of materials and forms and audiences. And I've made some works that are more experimental and fit more in kind of an avant-garde film tradition. I've made video installations and most recently this feature-length documentary, which didn't necessarily start out to be a feature-length documentary. It was just another art project that I was working on. But the great thing about being a professor is, well, two things that I love. First is that my life revolves around ideas. So my day job is very intellectually stimulating. I spend a lot of time talking about art and deep issues having to do with art with my students, and it's very inspiring to me. It's not the kind of conversations that you have when you're working. I've done this too. When you're working as like a freelance videographer, you don't sort of sit around and talk about epistemology all day. But those are the kind of things that I get to talk about in my day job. And the second thing is that the kind of professor job that I have, it's not the time you spend teaching is not full time. It's meant to be sort of half time-ish. It's not always, but you have the summer off, you have time off in the winter, you have spring break, you have Thanksgiving break, you have a lot of time off. And even in a week-to-week basis, about 2 days or 2.5 days of my life I can spend on making art. And that's part of my job. If I don't make art, I won't continue in this profession. That's part of how I get evaluated. So as far as the last question you asked goes, sure, the reception of this film has been really phenomenal, and it's affected my day job to the extent that I think I wouldn't have the really good job that I have right now if it hadn't been for this film. Because I was on the job market last year as the film was being finished, and then when the film premiered and did well, I think it made me a more attractive candidate for a number of schools. So I ended up with a really good job. So I think it did, feed into that.
And that's great that your college recognizes that is your creative, your life's work, your research, so to speak.
It's my research. And so it's also comes down to things like being able to come here. There's a great amount of support from a university for travel funds to go, like if you get into a film festival, like they tend to want to support you to go to that film festival. It reflects well on the school, and it's an important part of your profession. So yes, there's a lot of support from a university.
I think it's interesting when you talk about how you spend your day with ideas, because I think that's what's attracted me to teaching as well. And I've also done the freelance thing, and then I get home and I'm kind of tired and I don't want to work. I've already edited all day and I don't want to edit my own piece. And do you find yourself more productive as a teacher than other jobs, or does it just allow you to kind of put your headspace in a different place?
I would say that the thing for me, I just want to say a downside, because I think it's worth it to say the downside.
Yes.
The downside is that I'm not working, as a lot of people around me probably here are working my day job doesn't force me to practice my craft all the time. So, for example, I get really out of practice with shooting, or I don't always know the new technologies the way that other people do. Like, I'm sort of cloistered in academia, so I'm not totally in touch with the industry. And also, when it comes time to make a film, a big part of what you might need to do as an independent filmmaker is convince really good people to work on your film. And meeting those people is quite difficult in the world that I live in, right? I'm not working on commercials where I meet and make connections to like awesome DPs or really high-end animators that maybe can feed into what I do. So that's kind of the downside, I think, is that I'm very cloistered from like what's happening on a day-to-day basis in filmmaking.
And I think some of you are, particularly in Jillian, at least, you had feature films that debuted this year that are getting a lot of attention. And with that comes a lot of work, quite frankly, that perhaps you didn't a lot. I mean, everybody here has, but I think there's this moment when you just have so much attention that it almost is hard to keep up with every email that's in your inbox.
Oh, and I should say I was not teaching while I made Our Nixon.
Okay, that makes me feel better.
No, it was a full-time thing. I have been teaching full-time for 6 years. And they were visiting positions, and I needed a sabbatical, so I took one. I didn't get paid for that year. It was an investment of my time. No, and there's no way I could have done this. The last year of Our Nixon, there's no way I could have done it and taught at the same time. But I will get a sabbatical every few years, so hopefully...
Because of this new great job you got, so it all paid off.
So hopefully that'll work out on a good schedule for getting more films made. I don't know.
Well, I think you bring up some really interesting things, such as having faith in yourself and giving yourself time off, but also a leap of faith where you figure out how to pay yourself while you're being creative during that pre-production when nobody's paying you. Because Anita and I were talking yesterday about the life of a freelance artist, and really, like, a lot of my day job is trying to figure out how to pay the bills and still be a creative artist. Because I feel like we have outlets we need where there's certain jobs that would work against us, even if they're fantastic. We almost have to figure out why they don't work for us. And so, Anita, I'd love to go to you for a second, and then we're going to maybe powwow together, and you guys can make this a conversation. But you do very different style of work, but in some ways I'm guessing it's similar to Penny in that you need your own time and space to make your animation. Anita LeBeau is here from Canada, and she has 2 animated award-winning films, Louise and Big Drive, playing in our animated shorts program. So if nobody is familiar with the craft of animation, it takes a long time to make a short film. So how have you managed that?
Well, you know, my life now is very different than it was when I was physically working on both of those films. And yes, both of the films took a lot of time to do. Working from home, which meant that I could devote, you know, upwards of 12 hours a day if I wanted to on them, in and around all the family responsibilities that were obviously going to be there regardless. So, you know, if I had been on this panel 4 years ago, I would have been telling you about how it would just be a matter of just getting in the zone, and this would like physically happen to me, that I could just get into this groove where I was drawing, and I was so focused on it that, you know, my kids could come and ask me something and I could not respond. You know, it was something that I really had to. It was a challenge, because as much as I wanted to do that, I also had to tear myself away from it and give myself time for everything else that was going on. The downside with animation, in particular the ones that I was working on, is that it's very solo. You know, you're really just working by yourself for long periods of time, and that works incredibly well for my personality type. But it doesn't work very well when it comes to, you know, staying in the community and staying connected with people. So it has its pluses and minuses. It was a great plus a few years ago. Now I'm in a zone where I'm not really doing much of anything. And so it's like, how do I get back into it? It's a little bit of what was touched on in the discussions we had yesterday, is that what really makes you a filmmaker. You know, if you make one film, that's great, but what makes it a career? And the career is based on you being able to do one film and then being able to do another and then being able to do another, and so on and so forth. And so there's a point where you can sometimes hit a wall, you know, and it might take a long time before you can find something else.
I'm glad that you bring that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
It occurred to me that we haven't showed your clip yet, and we will. But
Sure.
I think that would be great for us to think about how to make a career. I think to find the zest and passion to make that first film as a creative person, it's almost like a calling you can't avoid, I feel like. But to make a career seems to be the greatest challenge. So I think that's the heart of this panel, actually. But first, let's see a bit of Anita LeBeau's work that she's been talking about.
August 23, Saturday, 9 days until my 96th birthday. It was just a regular day in the life of Louise.
Right. That's me someday, man. Bye! Bye!
Oh, well, 8 hours in the car. It's really so hot. Let's go.
Gotta go.
Take it easy.
drive mashup there. But it's certainly an example, you create that world from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's the zone you're referring to?
Oh, yeah, everything about it. I mean, I think any artist can relate to that you, and it isn't just artists, it's like it's whatever, your passion is. It seriously is a passion. You just sort of get so pulled into it and so absorbed in it. And there's all the pluses and minuses that go with it. So, my day job now is about reminding myself that I can get back there again, and to not lose the courage to see that. It's very easy sometimes when you're in a lull, in a space. And I'm saying this because I think it's important for film students to know this, that you're going to have so much of that, so much of these moments where you wonder, am I really doing the right thing, choosing to do this and staying there and wanting to make that happen. I'm filling my days now with a whole lot of writing, with the express purpose of believing that something that I'm going to write is going to turn into something. It's going to be manifested. And so I'm writing everything from, treatments for animation or screenplays or a short film or something. Just filling my world with that, and filling my life with cheerleaders. People in my life who, no matter how discouraged I get, I can call them and they will egg me on, and they will tell me, it's okay, it's going to happen, and you're brilliant, and something's going to will happen, and so that's a good thing. So what I feel I might bring to this panel is a little bit of reality, because this is where I'm at this point in my life, knowing that if I came back to this festival in 2 years, I believe I can bring a completely different perspective.
Well, I think it's really important that you mentioned that. Mm-hmm. I feel like, it's hard in the beginning of a career to even imagine that moment. Sure. I feel like you have this point where you have so many ideas and not enough time to execute them, and then you realize the practical aspects of... Sure. So just out of curiosity, when you say that some of your concern is, what's next, is it more internal, or is it more like out in the industry, and can I jump back in?
I think it's just trying to look at what I bring to this world artistically. I don't want to say that I'm not doing anything, because I'm working on documentary film, like short documentary film, and I love it. It's really enjoyable. I think when I say that, I feel like that's not necessarily the direction that I'm ultimately feeling I want to take. I say that I'm 52, right? So I'd like to think that I'm getting close to retiring, whatever that means when you're a filmmaker. But that ultimately my legacy will be a nice mixed bag of everything, but that it will be in film, and that I'll always be able to sort of do that. I'm also writing prose, and so maybe I'll be a prose writer. I don't know. I think one of the things I find about freelance is that your brain opens up to just so many possible things that you are capable of doing that working a 9-to-5 job doesn't do for you. Mm-hmm. Working 9 to 5, I think, makes you think this is what I'm going to do. It's secure, and maybe you don't think about those other little avenues. Because of what I do, I think that I am constantly thinking of new ideas, new directions, it's just so, it bubbles like it, all the time in my brain. It's just constant. And so constantly collaborating with people with these ideas. And I know one of these days something's going to work. It doesn't have to be a ton of money or anything like that. I just need to make a living at it. And so, that's what I kind of bring to, I think that's what I bring to this panel discussion, is that idea, let your mind, open up all the time constantly, and something will work, for you.
Well, and we actually thank you, because one thing we do at the festival, not only multiple genres, but we try to bring women in different phases of their careers. Mm-hmm. Some that we've heard from here have years of experience, hearing Yvonne Welbin talking about executive producing these films, and then, we have a 17-year-old filmmaker coming today, and I think that perspective is really valuable, so thank you.
Thank you.
To the right of Anita is Traven Rice, and she is here with a film called Side Effects. She knows Columbia because she actually is a theater alum from our college, Stevens College. This is very coincidental, actually. I didn't know her before I saw her film. But clearly you have your foot in many different disciplines, and I know you're a writer as well. So why don't we watch a little bit of Side Effects, and then we'll get into how you dabble all these different worlds as well.
Why are you so depressed?
How can you tell?
I don't know.
Elena, it's time to begin your wake session. The dosage will be distributed shortly.
When can I see you again, Circle Girl?
Good morning, Elena.
Morning.
So your film I don't want to talk about too much in some ways because it's really surprising and I don't want to give anything away. I loved when I first saw it just because it's something I haven't seen before as well. So what happened from the moment you were an aspiring theater student here at Stevens College and now you're a writer and filmmaker and many other things?
Yeah. A lot happened.
Yeah.
But I was here, doing theater, focusing on acting, but also directing. So that was I always kind of did both. And then right after this, I went and did an exchange program in Prague and studied film. So then I kind of went back and forth, and I did a lot of production work. So theater in Seattle, and then I couldn't get the film thing out of, I just was always fascinated by the film part. So I studied in Vancouver, and then I moved to New York and started doing production work, so working as a production assistant. Independent film, freelancing, and kind of working my way up that way, but that quickly became an AD track for me, and that turned out it's not actually the way that you get to become a director. So, then I just started doing short film, my own short film projects, but they come kind of few and far between when you can get the time to do them. And then I happened to marry a TV news producer who lost his job, and the media world was imploding, 5 years ago or so. And we decided as like a project I was out of work at the time too, so we took on, there was a new trend in media called hyperlocal. We started a hyperlocal news website for our neighborhood in the Lower East Side in Manhattan. And I was like, well, I'll do the arts culture part of it, and I'll support the artists in the community. And we did strategically talk about how that can work, as far as the filmmaking as well. And then we kind of just did it as an experiment to see how that would go, and it turned into a small business, a bigger project than we thought. And then we started a print version of that about 1.5 years ago.
So that is your day job now?
That is my day job.
Okay. It's a really amazing. I told her I want to live in the Lower East, the Lower Village, and be a part of our community, because I think it's really hard to create community in a large city. Yeah. And it seems like you're doing the antithesis of what media can do at times, when it becomes this very generic, not local thing.
Yeah, I think that we're getting farther away from local news right now, so it's nice. People really are responding really well to that, to wanting to know what's happening on their block, literally. Mm-hmm. I mean, granted, this is a special neighborhood. It's not. Yeah. It's not.
More things happen there than your average neighborhood, perhaps.
Right, and the population of our neighborhood is about 100,000 people.
Yeah, the size of our town.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, it's still relentless media where every day, I feel like where do you turn, there's probably unlimited things to do in that job.
Yeah,
so how do you imagine even making a movie or...
I don't know how I do it, but I did. I started, I knew I was going to shoot this on my own, I had everything kind of set up. I mean, so it's all consuming, the lowdown, and yet we control our own schedule. Okay. So... I definitely put that time aside and said, this is what I'm doing. And we were able to pull that off.
Mm-hmm. And just so you know, the short film is quite a long short film.
Yes.
It's a very complicated shoot, I can imagine.
Yeah,
It plays before another film, Wherever You Go, which plays on Saturday and Sunday. But so now are you working on your next one, or are you sort of nurturing this one along?
So I've been nurturing this along, and I finally reached the point where I'm ready for a feature.
Okay.
So that was kind of the goal, too, to be like, I just kept working on a few different things with my own shorts.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's time for me to do the feature.
Yeah, okay. All right, well, let's talk to Celia, because I feel like she also lives in New York. She makes a variety of work and also works in many different disciplines. I was telling, so this is Celia Rowlson-Hall. She has 3 different films you could experience at our festival in different ways, in fact. One of them, Sinos Dehan, plays in our shorts program that's called About Love, and all these different short films about the topic of love. And she also has another film that we were discussing earlier, The Audition, which is just so, it actually evoked so many different feelings in me, playing before the film Towheads, which plays tomorrow. And then we have this special way to experience films called kinetoscopes, but it's the idea of like, kinetoscopes are these old-fashioned things that you used to look at, and as a, before they thought of projecting the image, that you'd actually experience film isolated, which we do now again. And so you would look at them, but instead it's like a photo booth. And she has the film Prom Night up in by our box office, if you want to watch that. So clearly she's very busy. We could have curated many more works that she's done. But why don't we go ahead and watch a clip? I believe it's Sinos Dehan. We'll find out later. And then we'll talk about how she melds all of these different lives she has as an artist together. It played at the Borscht Film Festival, so that's why it was Borscht. So, Celia, I know that you're a dancer, a writer, an actress. You play in your films. I know you work in the fashion business and music video. And so where does film fit into all of that, and how did you go from one to the other?
Basically, I went to school for dance, and when I graduated, I came to New York and danced professionally for 2 companies, and then also was choreographing my own work, but for live performance. And then I was asked to choreograph for a music video, and the moment that I walked onto set, and granted it was actually a super crazy high budget music video, so I was really derailed. I was like, this is it, guys. Film. And then I choreographed like 20 other music videos after that, which was like, a bagel and a corner. And so anyways, so I went from, once I found film, I just knew that was it. It worked for my brain. And then I wanted to take my dance and my language of dance and translate that onto film, and I love it. And that's kind of where I'm at still today. So my day job is predominantly choreographing for film, for TV, for music videos, for commercials. And because I also, when I make my own films, I write them, I'm in them, I choreograph them, I style them, I do all the production design as well. And so because I have a sort of very specific way of how I like things to look, I have a couple of production designers that hire me to be their assistants because they know that I pay attention to detail. So if I'm not choreographing, I'm, art directing on commercials and things like that, and I just sort of piecemeal everything together in that way. But I will be very candid that saying, I rent. I don't own a home. I couldn't buy one right now, nor could I support a family. So I'm so happy with what I am doing and very fulfilled. But it is not. I live a very sort of, paycheck to paycheck lifestyle.
Single gal in New York kind of life.
I know, we have a sitcom in our head right now. You on a music video set. No, I'm glad you mentioned that because actually I am a very independent filmmaker here in Columbia, Missouri. So the idea that you get like this grand commercial job that would pay the bills is totally impossible, and nobody would live here to do that. But I guess there is this idea that when you work in commercial production or music videos, when you have friends who freelance, and like that's where the money is, but maybe not so much, huh?
Well, it depends. I mean, you know, I choreographed for a show on HBO this summer, and I mean, it paid for a good 6 months so that I can do these things.
And that's what I wonder. Do you just find the time? Like, I'm sure there's certain jobs that are too hard to pass down, and then when you get a bit of money saved, then you can kind of, do you create your own space, or do you just find ways to do your films in between all the freelance work?
The way that I look at it is I'm always making my films, and then everything else sort of, you know, kind of comes in between. So when I get offered jobs that I find if they're not going to meet my rate that I have for my day rate, if it's not going to be something that's creatively going to excite me, or it's a director that I want to work with, something like that, then I know that day is far more valuable for me to spend it on my own work than that. And that's been a huge thing that I've really come to terms with just in the past year or so, because you say yes to everything first, and then the next big thing is saying no,
right,
and not feeling bad about it. So,
and that's one thing. I mean, that is why I'm so grateful that you come here in person, because it takes a while to get here. But also, I feel like when you're an artist and a filmmaker, time is your most valuable commodity, right? And so, even if it's a weekend to refresh from all of the other stuff, or a weekend to work on your own stuff, all of that. So you were saying that you know right now you couldn't pay the bills or something like that. I think
if she had a family.
If she had a family, sorry, yes, thank you. And I think that's really interesting because I personally, that's when I realized, oh, you know, because I used to say yes to more, and now that I do, it's like I guess I can't do that right now because now I do have to pay more bills. Is there a sort of place that you want to get to in like 5 years kind of thing, or do you just kind of, it seems to me that you're influenced by all these different artistic ways, and who knows what you'll be doing 5 years from now? Am I wrong in saying that?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, I really have such a strong desire to really explore feature filmmaking, because I have made over 30 shorts.
Wow.
And I'm just so ready to sink my teeth into long-form storytelling. And so I really, the way that I operate is I can kind of only look right in front of me, or I'm going to have huge panic attacks. So, you know, I just want to, if I am being creative till the day I die, I don't care how much I have in my bank account. I do also want to have a family, and you know, those things are also very important to me. So I am just hoping that when those things come together, there will be opportunities that will present themselves. So I'm doing a lot of trusting, basically.
Yeah, I feel like everyone here must have a huge leap of faith and trust. I like your idea of a self-sabbatical, too. Like, you get to a point where you're like, I've got to do this, and I have to have the time to do it, and find a way to put that aside. Is that, I mean, I'll go to your right now and ask Jillian, is that what you had to do to make, this is your feature-length debut? Or,
yeah.
Right? Okay, so Jillian's here with the documentary film Maiden Trip, which I hope you'll all go to tonight at Missouri Theater at 7:30. It's our opening night film. So when you see this film, it's a documentary about a 14-year-old girl who sails around the world 2 years. So just even making it seems time-consuming, at least 2 years.
Well, it was funny. When I originally came across the story, I had a full-time job at Sundance Channel in New York, and I was sort of like, oh, this will be an easy film to make. I'll just like give this girl a camera and then see her in 2 years. What else would be involved?
Clearly, you don't know many 14-year-olds there.
I went to visit her for the first time. I hadn't taken vacation in like 2 years. I was like suffering from a bit of like workaholism, and I finally took vacation after like many years of being terrified to take vacation, and I love that I took vacation to like go meet this girl in
really
Holland.
hard.
Yeah, that was my vacation. I biked across Holland alone to this place where she was living on a boat with her dad, and I came back from that trip and put in my 2 weeks notice at Sundance Channel mostly because that sounds like a very daring thing to do. It was actually not very daring because in the industry, so I write and produce TV promotions, which are like commercials for TV shows, like just a commercial, but like, you know, this Sunday on Mad Men, this is going to happen, tune in. So that is what I do for a living. And I was doing it at the time on staff at Sundance Channel. You don't make a lot of money doing that, but if you are freelance and work for yourself, the day rates and the amount of money you can make is a lot. Like if I worked full-time just days for a year, I would make more than twice as much as I was making at Sundance Channel. So it was not a very it's not like I left my job and like I left my job and leaving to go freelance is scary, but it was also a good decision for my career doing that and happened to coincide with starting to work on Maiden Trip. So working freelance, doing this work allowed me to take these chunks of time to go. I mean, I ended up visiting Laura like 7 or 8 times as she was sailing around the world, so that's over a year and a half, while also starting to launch my freelance career. And like I think it is a lot about just sort of like working really hard and having good intentions, and like you do have to kind of put a lot of trust in the universe. Like one thing that worked out really well for me is that my boss from Sundance Channel had recently left to go work at AMC, which is within the same company, but that's not really important. But he sort of, you know, let me know that if you leave Sundance Channel, I'll hire you at AMC. So essentially my life for like 2 years was go sit on a boat for like a month in Darwin, Australia, and then a few days before coming back, I'd be like, hey, Steve, I'm going to be back, and he'd put me on a project. So that's like a really fortunate kind of situation to be in. And I would come back, and the nature of my work is also nice because you can work day shifts and night shifts at different companies or at the same company, and you get a day rate for both sessions. So I had the ability to go away for a month and then spend a month working 16-hour days as if I had worked for both months. So essentially for 2 years, like I didn't see other people with the exception of people I worked on Maiden Trip with and people I worked on promos with. And like for me, that was a lot of social interaction. Like there was not a lot of solitary work, so I wasn't starved for anything else. But it is kind of funny now to realize that like most of my friends are people that I went to college with or people that I know through work or working on the film. So it's a lifestyle that's not for everyone, but I really enjoy working. I like both things. Yeah.
But you knew that was for you. I feel like it's a certain kind of person who wants kind of like a solitary, you're your own boss and you set your own schedule, so to speak, and you have to learn how to say no. I think that's really interesting that Celia said that. I think that's
I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah, okay. Clearly the 16-hour days.
Although I did take off today and Monday.
Yes, we encourage you to say no. Well, let's watch a clip of this amazing film we've been talking about that we made all these sacrifices for.
Wat jullie hier zien is een disaster. Dit is ravioli. En dat komt hieruit. Ja, ik weet niet exact wat er gebeurde, maar ineens kwam dat ding bovenop me. En ja, nou en ik ook helemaal onder voor ravioliet. Dus ik denk dat het maar iets makkelijks wordt vandaag. Iets van soep of zo.
So, Jillian, I found this film really about so many different things, but it was also incredibly inspiring because in some ways she takes this huge leap of faith as well, but at a very young age, and so everybody's like 14, you know. But to me, it's interesting because as an artist, I feel like you have to know yourself really well. It's really going against the grain, everybody here who's chosen this career and clearly came from different ways, and I'm sure you're very different than people in maybe not your family, but you know, it's a different path that you have to believe in yourself, and it takes a while, I've found, before the people around you, typically until you have more work out there, before they're like, oh, okay, you know?
Oh yeah, people thought I was totally insane.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Like, nobody thought I was actually making a movie.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, it was kind of a weird thing, because I always wanted to be a filmmaker, and I don't know, I feel like maybe it was just my family, maybe it was just kind of like society in general, but I feel like there's a lot of messaging out there that like, that's an unrealistic career goal and you cannot do that. And so I was sitting in my little cubicle at Sundance Channel and read about this kid who was like fighting the Dutch government to be able to pursue her dream of sailing around the world. And I was kind of like, huh, like, I could do that. You know, like, I have this, I think everybody sort of has things that they want to do, and you kind of wonder, like, how much am I willing to fight for this? How much do I want it? And it took me, I guess, probably longer than some people and shorter than some other people. I think I was 26, and I just thought, you know, life's really short. I'm going to write to this girl, and we're going to make a film together, and that happened. So, yeah, I mean, reading about her story and her kind of like taking this leap of faith, in a way, anything that you're doing like that is sort of an art. Like, I saw her trip as sort of like her art. And it's really courageous, and most people think you're crazy. And then, of course, like, when you do it, or when, you know, your film premieres and nice things happen for you, then people are like, oh, you were actually doing something. Like, that's great, congratulations. Then they're all, you know, like, maybe there were several people who were kind of like rooting for me all the way, and understood it somewhat, but it is kind of like you have to just go out and do it and not care that people think you're totally insane.
We're going to open it up to the audience soon, but I just wanted to ask everybody a question. I think it's interesting, you know, how you've all decided to get to that point. At what point did you say to yourself, I'm a filmmaker? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I think particularly in the United States, I mean, I actually got into film overseas, and I felt like, actually, I can remember in Poland, they go, you're a filmmaker. And I'd be like, no, I'm not. You know, I've just made these little things. And, like, you make films, right? I was like, yeah, then you're a filmmaker. I was like, okay. But here I feel like, you know, a lot of times it's, well, what's your last piece? Where has it been? Okay, then you're a filmmaker. You know what I mean? It's not the fact that you clearly devoted many years to being this artist, and you're going to have hits and you're going to have misses, and you're still a filmmaker, right? And all of that sort of feeds into that next thing you do. So I just wonder, at what point did you guys sort of say to myself, I'm an artist, this is my path, I can't do anything else?
I don't know if it's exactly what you're asking, but I wanted to say this because Jillian said when she was 26, she had this moment, and I totally had this moment when I was 26, and I was working on film sets. I was working as a script supervisor for just the stupidest movies. And like just the dumbest people were paying money to make these movies by these idiotic morons. And then those people somehow convinced other people to work on their films. And I was like, this is amazing. It was a huge learning experience for me because I think I had a desire to make films. And I thought, well, I can't do that. That seems really hard. And I don't know if I'm smart enough. I don't know if I'm confident enough. I don't know if I'm whatever. And then these people were just so... And these films were terrible. And so I looked around and I thought, I can do this. Like, you know, if this guy, and they were always men, these like huge ego, inflated ego, dumb men who were like, I'm making a work of art. And you're like, no, this is not a work of art, but like, thank you for paying me for working on it. But they were convincing investors to put money into these films, which is why we all had jobs on these sets. And I thought, well, if these people can do this, I can do this. And it was literally a moment. It was like that day, I turned to all the assistant crew on this film, the assistant camera, the assistant sound, and I said, can you come with me? I want to make this film called The Abortion Diaries. I've wanted to make it for 5 years. I've been a wuss about it. Can you come with me to do this? I can't pay you very much, but we can do it in 7 days. And they all said, that sounds amazing. And I was like, great. And then literally the minute that shoot ended, I went into pre-production during that shoot. So I was script supervising, and then in my at night, I was pre-production on this film, and then we just went and did it. And we did the shoot, we did it in 7 days, and it was like, oh my God, I just made a film. And so it was just this total moment of my life where it was, I don't even know how that happened, except that I was just so, it was just like that day. I don't know. It just was so clear that I could do this.
It's a really good point, though. When you think of all the films out there, I think to myself, somebody pitched this,
Yes!
and somebody greenlit it, and, there's a lot of it, and I can't get this little thing made.
No, it's actually really important, because it's actually not rocket science. It's really not. Like, you'd have to just do it a bunch of times, and you get better at it. Like, it's like anything else.
I would say, actually, honestly, I did it like right out of the shoot, and I always wanted to do it. The directing part, and then I was like, I did it, now what? And then there was like a big lull, and I had to do a lot of other things. And so I think my mentality in a weird way has always been like, well, am I still a filmmaker? I know I was a filmmaker. Am I still a filmmaker? And I think after every film, like I take a break, and then I'm like, well, am I still a filmmaker?
Actually,
that's
crazy,
but I'm like, I don't know if I'm still.
I do that all the time. I finish a film, and then I'm like, probably I should just go work at a bookstore. This is so hard. This is really hard.
This is filmmaker therapy.
Yeah.
It's like, I did that, but now am I still?
That's my fantasy easy job.
I would love a bookstore.
No, I wouldn't.
Is it because for me, it's because I haven't in a while, even if it's burgeoning in there. So yeah.
But I have this fear, like, am I going to make another one? I don't know. Like, is that, I want to, but I don't know if I will. I don't know.
I remember feeling so in awe of the fact that I was sitting drawing and that I was allowed to do that, and people were giving me money to do it, and not really thinking of it in terms of me being a filmmaker. And that really only happened when the film was done, and it was wrapped, and it was, and then you see it in print, Filmmaker, Anita LeBeau. It's like, oh my God, it didn't, you could as easily have said, father, Anita LeBeau, or something like that. It was a very weird sort of disconnect between who I thought I was and the way that other people were seeing me. Mm-hmm. But, you get used to it, and it feels good. But it is also that feeling like, what kind of a period of time has to pass before you feel like, okay, maybe I'm not that anymore. And, so you just always have to sort of realize that your past speaks for what you are now, too. And so, yeah, I'm a filmmaker because I did make some films, and I'm still making films, so that's good,
One thing that I kind of find interesting is that, like, the day job aspect of filmmaking, at least in the US. I mean, I know very, very few people who are like career filmmakers. Like, that's all they do to support themselves.
Do you know anyone like that?
No, not really.
No, when you say very few.
Like Alex Gibney?
No, he makes commercials. No one. Especially in documentary.
Yeah, so
there's
especially
no such
as
thing
a documentary
as being
filmmaker.
a filmmaker for
so
a living.
So it's interesting, like, if somebody says, what do you do? I say, before South by Southwest, I would not have said I'm a documentary filmmaker. Mm-hmm. I just didn't, it felt weird. But now I'll say I'm a documentary filmmaker, and often I'll kind of pause and be like, well, I also make commercials for TV shows, and that's how I earn a living. Mm-hmm. And I always find that, I'm not really thinking so much about, like, how they're perceiving it, but I do kind of feel like it diminishes what I do as a filmmaker, because it's like saying it's a hobby. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because most people, the thing that they do for work that they're recognized for is also the thing that brings them money. So it's an unusual kind of like balance between what you do for money and what you do that defines your career. Mm-hmm. And I think most people that disconnect is like, oh, then you're not really a filmmaker, you're a commercial producer.
And I think that's partly where the arts is in our specific country. It's, I have friends, and I'm guessing I have lots of dance friends, and I mean, you can work and dance your tail off, and it's, you don't get paid a lot, even when they're quite successful. It's really interesting. and writers and other people. It's really who, as an artist, makes a living. A handful of people, and otherwise they have really great support, or they're doing something else.
I think it's fine. I don't want to make a living as a filmmaker. I see what that means. What that means is having other people control what I do. I mean, there's just no getting around it. I don't want to. I don't want other people to tell me what to do, whether it's the government or a corporation. I'd rather just have freedom, and I'd rather be a professor. I love being a professor. It's not some great hardship for me. It's a wonderful career, and it happens to let me do another thing that I love. It's not even like a day job per se. It's just like it's another thing I do. Like I really love being a professor. It's not like a
I've always
what a bummer.
I've always had the mentality of like, but can I really say that if I haven't been paid to do it? Like, how can I say that's what I do if I haven't been paid to do it, or paid well, or if it wasn't successful, or
Celia, when did you consider yourself a filmmaker? Just because, and also, actually, how do you even describe? Like, if somebody's at a dinner party and they're like, Celia, what do you do? What's your answer to that?
I think honestly, because I really just like sort of obsessively make things all the time, and I was sort of not born with any kind of business sense. So even the idea of like submitting your film to a festival, I wasn't doing things like that. I was on to the next project because I wanted to practice my craft. My DP, God bless him, like submitted one of my shorts, and it went to South by and it went to all these places, and then people were like, oh, like you make films because somebody else said you did. So that was probably, I think honestly, once you kind of like hit the festival circuit and you meet other filmmakers, then I guess you consider yourself a filmmaker. I mean, it was only 6 months ago that I could be like, throw a 50 on there because that's what I want. I didn't know what to say like that 6 years ago.
I still have no idea what that means.
So anyway, Lynn.
Lynn. Yeah.
Jillian's like,
she's working in archival footage right now. It's like a $50 bill.
No.
We're all like, $50?
So it's just, just constantly learning, and still, I mean, I think I watched an interview on like YouTube with Jodorowsky, and he said, we're not cell phones anymore in terms of you don't just pick up your cell phone to call. Like, we have emails, we text, we send pictures, we do all these things, and in a way, we have to be the same as what these things are. So, the whole idea of like jack of all trades, master of none, I think that's absolutely just not valid in our society and the way people work and the way people communicate. And so, yes, I am a filmmaker, but I'm like a ton of other things, and that's what makes Celia the artist, I guess, or Celia the Celia. I don't care. It's more, I want the work to be where it needs to be most expressly told, so that could be film, it could be dance, could be a newspaper.
You're a storyteller, it sounds like, mostly, and many, many things, so yeah, in all these different ways. Well, I'd be curious if you guys have any questions. I've been asking all of them. Right in the front row. I think we have a microphone they would like you to use, so that way it's heard outside of this room.
All right, well, I loved all the panels today, but I particularly love this one because I feel like it pertains to me right now. And I used to be a film student, and then I found I couldn't afford it, so I moved back to my city, and then kind of went in a funk, job searching for years, then eventually came back to film. And right now I'm on trying to make up for lost time, trying to learn as much as I can. So I'm basically in, I forget who was saying it, that yes, I'll do that for free position right now. And I also have done some freelance writing to compensate because other people pay better than I do. I'm in a little bit different position because I have a baby. So for me, I'm trying to navigate following my passion with being responsible and finding a day job that, that will pay. How did you all kind of, I mean, it's obviously not the same thing, but how did you navigate following your passion with basically living?
Well, I can say that I followed my passion by sacrificing a whole lot of it towards parenting. It took probably an extra 3 years to do a film that probably should have taken 2 years to do. You know, two little kids, and wanting to be mom first, and doing it very guiltily because, you know, knowing that you're still not putting as much parenting towards them as, you know, all those other wonderful model mothers out there, you know, while you're also trying to struggle to do what you really want to do, you know, to have your passion, and at the same time convincing yourself that you're modeling something to your kids. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's what will happen. You know, I have very creative daughters, and I think that's great. But it is a very tough decision. It's a tough thing for women in general when it comes to the industry, and I can hear it on the panel, because it's as if feeling like, yes, I want to be a mother someday, but knowing that I can't do that right now because I've got this career path, and you know, everybody's going to do it differently. No one's going to do it perfectly wrong or perfectly right either. You know, I just did what I had to do. So I do feel like I'm kind of way behind on understanding, like, technologies and you know, social media and all those things that might actually be able to advance things, so that it's to the point now where I'm a little scared to even go there. So, you know, it's tough. I don't know if I have an answer for you, except that it's really totally about balance, and knowing that it's going to be a little bit of going forward and going back, you know, all the time. Like, it's a constant thing.
I think sometimes we feel this pressure that it has to happen right now. And personally, I'm a little bit where you are right now. And I've been really inspired by, you know what, there's time out there.
There's so much time.
I can make movies until I'm 90.
Do you know? Do you guys know how old Nora Ephron was when she directed her first film?
Yeah.
She was 50.
Give
Okay?
me your email,
Like, there's
because
time, you know? Like, you don't have to do everything right away. But I wanted to say, I'm sorry, I wanted to say one thing about, it's not all about, your question was kind of more general than just about balancing work and family. It's also, you were saying, how do I make a living and also pursue my passion? I mean, again, for me, I got the job done first. I had to. I don't have anyone else pay. You know, it was like I grew up really poor. No one's giving me money. I just like had to have a job. So I just always had a job. And I sort of slowly figured out the kind of job that would let me do what I want to do. You know, I didn't have that job throughout my 20s. It took a long time to figure out, oh, if I was teaching, but I was teaching in a nonprofit setting, which was not paying very much, and it never was. And it was all consuming. It was great. I loved it. But it was 80 hours a week, and that was barely paying my rent. So I thought I should teach at the college level. So it was a slow, you know, get the MFA, get more work done, so people will actually give me a teaching job, which took a long time.
Another thing I should say, sorry, I just about when you're a filmmaker, you're a freelancer. And so the one beauty to all of that sort of, or to that sort of arrangement is that when you do have kids, you can work around their schedule and their needs to a large degree. And so that is a plus that you don't necessarily have from a 9-to-5 sort of a job. So and also when you're on it, like I've done documentary, so it's, you know, animation's kind of different, but with documentary sometimes it's just from shoot to shoot to shoot, right? And so you've got the time in between. You can plan your shoot. It might only be a day or 3 days or 7 days or whatever it is, but then you've got, you know, time around that. So I certainly didn't want to make it sound all dire, but I know that in my circumstance with animation, it was something where I had to work many hours to kind of push this thing through. And when my film took longer to make, it's because I gave time, and I had producers that allowed for that I could take the time out for my kids when they really needed me the most. You know, it's doable.
I was just going to say, I have like a very particular philosophy about this topic. I started out, like my very first jobs were working on TV documentaries, like good TV documentaries for like PBS and HBO, but at the lowest levels, those jobs pay very little, and the work is like all consuming, I would go to work when it was dark out and come home when it was dark out, and I didn't really have any time to work on my own things. And also you don't like move up in those kinds of jobs. So what I started to do was not be very concerned about the job that I had that was making, like whether the job I had that made money was specifically related to what I really wanted to be doing, and just found jobs on Craigslist. I was an SAT tutor. I tutored other stuff. I did basically just the jobs that would give me health insurance without being full-time jobs and would pay the most money. And then I realized very quickly that in creative jobs, no one will hire you and pay you to do something you've never done. So I would do whatever for work, whatever anybody would pay me to do that I was qualified to do. And then I would find internships or people who needed free help and I could be really selective because tons of people want free help on Craigslist with films. So if it was something that I was passionate about that interested me, I would work on that for free outside of whatever I was doing to earn money. And all of those things ultimately became really important. And then by doing those things for free, you become a person who does those things. Somebody can recommend you to do that thing. That's where my job at that basically launched my career, working on other people's documentaries for free from Craigslist. So yeah, that's my particular take, but it's also based on my experience, and I'm sure everybody has a different take, but that's what I...
That's a good question.
Some of my favorite films, one being so simple, and it's a favorite of a lot of people, but The Red Balloon. And that film would not have been made without that son being born to that father and them having that relationship. A few years ago, this amazing short called Baby Walks into a Bar. People know it, right? It's amazing. And it's called Baby Gets Trashed at a Bar or something. And it's just you just actually I just see these people, and then if you see Towheads tomorrow night, it's taking your life and taking what's around you and incorporating that into your world, into your art, and into your vision. And I find I get really excited when I see things like that, because to me it's just there's a lot of heart and clarity and integrity to it. And so I love seeing films like that, where you don't ignore half of you use all of you. So
you could use your son as voice talent too.
Yeah, they make great crew as they get older. I think that's one thing I really love. Everybody came here because they were willing to share their ideas and gracious with their time. So I feel whatever we can't talk about at this festival, do see their films, do go see Towheads and have a conversation later. And I think everybody's perspective is really different on that. We have time for one more question. In the back, I see a hand.
Hi. Okay. I'm a young filmmaker. I'm going to Mizzou at the moment, and Mizzou's film production course isn't exactly as developed as the one here. So I'm just kind of floating in midair over there in my dorm. And I kind of teach myself screenwriting through books and through internet and things like that. And there's one particular question on one of the blogs that I read. The person who writes the blog asks the filmmakers, what advice would you give your 18-year-old self, and or the self that you were when you started realizing, oh, I'm in love with film? And that's my question to you all.
That's awesome. Let's end with everybody just, what would you say to your 18-year-old self? Well put.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm fine. I talk to a lot of students every day, so I feel like this is the kind of question that...
What do you say to your 18-year-old self?
I do talk to my 18-year-old self every day. People I'm 35 years old, and I think this is probably something you can all relate to. And then people say, oh, you have this film, you know what you're doing, and how did you do that, or something. And I'm just I don't know what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm doing. Having a creative life of any kind is just a leap into the void, and you just don't know. And I didn't know that I'd be doing this when I was 18, But I'm glad that when I just sort of let myself continue to build a life based on things that I thought I was excited about. And I don't know how I ended up doing this, but I mean, I could sort of boringly track each little thing, but it's just to follow your dreams. It's so dumb and cliche, but it's true. Like, you just have to kind of let your passion guide you if you want a creative life, and have some trust. And Jillian said that earlier, and just kind of trust the universe, you know? And, yeah, I don't know. You know, no one should know what they're doing with their life when they're 18. That's really depressing. So you don't really want to be on, like, some path that's set there in front of you. And if you did, you wouldn't want to be a filmmaker, because that's not a path. There's no path. We all have totally different paths, right? So if you want a path, don't have a creative life.
Yeah, I would use the words from Dan in Real Life, where he says, "Prepare to be surprised." I would have told myself to be a lot braver, a lot gutsier, a lot more courageous, because I was none of those things.
Me too.
I wish I had been. I probably would have started sooner, but I still have no regrets. I got where I got when I got to it, and the path was winding, and the winding path is always the most interesting one. So I guess that's what I would say. Especially just prepare to be surprised, because boy, I'll go home tomorrow and I'll have a completely different thing happen to me than I expected, and that'll be great.
I would say, there's a lot of pressure, but I don't really know where it really comes from. I think mostly from ourselves, to do something quickly and to succeed right away. And if we haven't done it quickly, then we must not be doing it right. And I definitely felt that way. And I think I would just say, don't be so hard on yourself. It's true, there isn't a path. But you don't know that until you find your own. Like, you can't believe it until you go and be like, oh yeah, there's no path. So, stick with it, and whatever it is. And don't put so much pressure on yourself to have something accomplished.
Instinct. 100% instinct. I wish I had listened to my instinct many times, because you get in really kind of terrible situations when you're listening to other people and not you. So it's all here.
My advice would just be to just go do it. There are always, I think, a million reasons with anything that you could do to not do it. There are a million obstacles. There are a million things that you don't know. Laura actually once said this thing that's not in the film. Laura, the subject of my film, said, I think I asked her, like, what advice she, kind of like a similar question, but for younger kids, and she was like, if you want to do something, you don't need to know that you can do it, you just have to try. And obviously that's very, like, sweet kid advice, but it's kind of true. And I think for me, advice that I wish I had given myself at 18 that I still try to give myself now is to, like, remember to enjoy it. And just to kind of, like, enjoy the ride and enjoy the process. And it's not really about getting to this point. It's about all of the work that you're doing. And if you don't enjoy it, then, like, why are you doing it? So I feel weird ending this.
No, that's great. That's actually good.
I'm going to clap for that young woman, too. That's really the loveliest ending. I hope every Q&A has a kind of ending this weekend, if not, pretend it did. But thank you for that last question. I hope that you got a chance to get to know some of the artists here this weekend. They clearly put a lot of time, heart, and soul. Each film represents who they are in their own unique path. You can join us tonight at 7:30 to start with Jillian's maiden trip. And we really designed this festival to experience it together. It's not all over the place. So hopefully you've made a few friends. Thank you very much for Citizen Jane Film School. We'll see you soon. Thank you.